Hi everyone, you're watching Bethel Today and I'm your host, Matt Knickerbocker. We're just a few short weeks away from the next municipal election, so tonight's show is going to be another opportunity to meet some of the candidates that will appear on the ballot this coming November 3rd. So I'm pleased to welcome tonight two candidates for the Board of Assessment Appeals, John Menti and Thomas O'Leary. Gentlemen, thank you, and thanks for joining me on the show, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Now, I want to warn our viewers, don't touch that dial. Because when you hear something like as exciting as the Board of Assessment Appeals, you might think, okay, I might wait for something more exciting than that. But this is one of those boards that you don't know about it until you really need it. So these gentlemen are going to give us some valuable information. So I have to tell you, to start this conversation, that a lot of people come up to me and say, Matt, why on earth do you want to run for first selectman when the economy is so crazy? But you guys are really going for the hot seat, aren't you? So Tom, tell us what the Board of Assessment Appeals does and what its role is.
Sure. The Board of Assessment Appeals is a municipal agency, but it's somewhat unique in that it's an actual advocate for the taxpayers, those taxpayers who feel that the assessor has either erred or was erroneous in denying their exemptions. So it gives folks a direct pipeline to come in and challenge those assessments.
So this is for when people's property, when their real estate, their home that they live in, and valuables are assessed for tax purposes, correct?
That's part of it. The focus is usually on real property because of the size of it, but it also includes personal property, which would include motor vehicles, pleasure craft boats, and then in the case of businesses, all of their business equipment, their computers, their fax machines, anything that they're using to in their business.
Okay.
And those are dealt with, by the way, at two different times during the year.
Mm-hmm.
In the spring, appeals are heard for real estate, and in the fall, a shorter period for motor vehicles and other personal property.
Okay. John, how often does the revaluation process take place? You know, how often does that hit homeowners when the town comes around and does that?
Well, it's a 5-year reevaluation under the state law, mm-hmm. and last year we went through a reevaluation in Bethel, and so you know, we have a few more years before it hits again. But you know, again, the homeowners have a right to still every year appeal their assessment on their personal property or their real estate property. Mm-hmm.
So, is there a time limit or something after the state-mandated assessment period is done? Does the clock tick and people have a certain amount of time if they want to appeal it?
Well, the assessor has a timetable in every town to follow, mm-hmm. and then once that grand list is put together, legal notices are sent out, and then people do have a time period on which to file an appeal. I should say, though, that the right course of action is that property owners or homeowners should first visit with the assessor, mm-hmm. To either question or understand, or in some case challenge the assessment that's being proposed for them. Mm-hmm. If that fails, then they have a window in the spring to challenge the appeal. And one other important thing that even successful appellants don't understand. Your appeal and any relief that you get is for 1 year. The assessor has the legal right to go back and change that assessment the following year. Mm-hmm. So whether they do or not is questionable, but someone really needs to look at their assessment every year. Mm-hmm. I think the point that you want our viewers to know is that if there was a reevaluation 2 years ago, it doesn't mean that people can't speak up until the next reevaluation. They can come down any year.
Oh, so at any time, yes, during that 5-year period?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, who is the tax assessor in the town of Bethel?
John?
Anne-Marie Hearing,
okay,
tax assessor.
Okay.
And just to add what Tom was saying, not this past assessment, the one prior, at my house, they assessed me for a finished basement. Right. And I went down to the assessor's office.
Which means that's going to raise the value.
Right,
that they
exactly.
Right.
You know, it's finished with livable space, and
mm-hmm.
and so I went to the assessor's office, and I took a couple of pictures and went down there, and without going through the Board of Assessment Appeals, but I had it taken off. Like Tom was saying, your first avenue is talk to the assessor, and the process, it worked well. There was no problem. It was taken off immediately, and that was the end of it.
Okay. Now, the Board of Assessment Appeals doesn't report to the assessor's office. You're a completely separate agency, correct?
Absolutely. Totally independent, and obviously the assessor serves the role of a resource when you try to get insight as to why a particular assessment is the way it is, but absolutely independent. I might add to John's description of the assessor that we're very fortunate in Bethel because we have someone who, the assessor was in the office for a number of years, studied, learned the craft, became certified under the former assessor, and probably, in my mind, the most important feature that she has is that she's also a Bethel homeowner.
So there's going to be a high degree of sensitivity and try to be as absolutely fair as possible.
Absolutely, right.
Okay. Now, how many people are on the Board of Assessment Appeals in total?
There are 3 people on the board, and during a reevaluation year, the Board of Selectmen can appoint a 4th person in the event there's a heavy caseload to help out with the board.
Right.
The last reevaluation, the current board did not do that, and it was quite a load for the current board.
And how long is the term?
2-year term.
Okay. So now, in general, how heavy is the workload? I would imagine right after an assessment year when everybody's property value changes, there's probably going to be a lot of challenges, but then does it taper down, or are you busy pretty much year-round?
2 reevaluations a year ago when I was previously on the Board of Assessment Appeals, we heard 50 appeals, real estate appeals, and I think we made modifications in roughly half of them, about 25. But in non-reevaluation years, the appeal load is probably a 1/10 of that.
Right. Now, what are the qualifications that you gentlemen have to be on this board?
Very simple. You just have to be a Bethel elector.
Okay, so...
And a desire to, obviously...
And a desire to serve.
Be on a board, right.
So, basic qualifications, 18 or older, and
a voter.
And a voter.
Resident voter, and wants to,
Well, now, does the position require any special training, to understand real estate values or any of this?
It doesn't specifically require, but it's available. And there is a very, very good state organization that actually runs a training class each year. They publish a cookbook, a how-to book, so that everybody doesn't reinvent the wheel. And anybody that is elected to the Board of Assessment Appeals would be well served to attend that as soon as possible. It's a 4 or 5 hour session held various places around the state.
Right. So take me through the process. Let's say I get my assessment, and I open it up and I look at it and I say, wow, they think my house is way nicer than it really is, or way bigger or something, whatever that parameter is that caused that to go way up. So my first step, as you mentioned, is to contact the tax assessor herself, Anne Marie, and so let's say she determines, nope, this is right, this is a fair number. So then I say, well, I would like to take this before the appeals board. So what's my next step?
After the legal notice is published, then people come in and apply for an appointment, and then by mail they receive a notice of their appointment, a particular night, particular time, and the board tries to stay on schedule. I believe the statutes also insist that at least one of the sessions be a Saturday, so that's not just evenings.
Oh, so people can, have an opportunity if they work
out of town, out of the area, right.
And the appeals are heard. Then the board makes their decisions and notifies people, and then the property owner then can either be satisfied with the results of the appeal, or they can go to Superior Court and take it further.
Okay, so if they, now when they come before the Board of Assessment Appeals, are they required to have legal representation, an attorney?
No.
No?
They can if they like, but it's
Okay.
not required, no.
How often do they? Just out of curiosity.
I think Tom can answer that.
Yeah, so
If
I should point out to our viewers that John is running for the first time on this
Right.
board, and Tom is quite experienced in this.
If the piece of property in question is a condo or a large commercial thing, you may or may not have an attorney. It can be done, or if it's an estate, and there's no one other than the attorney who is the executive for the estate to represent it, they can do it. Or the homeowner, I keep saying the homeowner, the property owner,
Right.
can also ask anyone to be their agent. I could ask you and designate you to be my agent to go and make the appeal. It doesn't have to be someone that is a member of the bar.
Now, when someone does go through this process and they feel that the property value has not been accurately assessed, what would be a reason to either approve or deny that appeal? Like what factors do you look at when you determine that number is either fair or not fair?
Well, first of all, let's when we use the word fair, it's
I should say accurate.
Yeah,
maybe.
accurate, because fair is probably in the eye of the beholder.
Right.
But other than a brand new dwelling, the assessments on reevaluation are done with considerable data from market values primarily. But let me say the things that don't work, and
Okay.
and in case I missed them, because some of them are really good. I apologize for reading, but
Well, that's all right.
To not be successful in your appeal is to come in and say, I'm here because I can't afford to pay the tax.
Right.
Not the responsibility of the Board of Assessment Appeals. It may be very well true that the person can't pay the tax, but it is not because of the assessment. Some folks are even quicker and come in and say, it's too high, lower it. That probably isn't going to be successful either. Very interesting one, come in and say, how did you arrive at this value? The Board of Assessment Appeals, by statute, has no responsibility to defend the assessor's appraisal. It is incumbent on the appellant to make the case for why it should be something different.
To show why they believe it's inaccurate.
Right.
Okay.
And another one that folks come in is because they have some problem with the town. They may have just recently been denied an appeal on the Board of Zoning Appeals, or they have some zoning problem, or they have a problem with a neighbor that they feel the town hasn't resolved, and so they want to come in and have that dealt with by having their assessment lowered.
Right.
I will say, too, that a number of people flow through, and very quickly we determine that what they really need to be doing is talking to the tax collector to apply for one of the many exemptions that a person can get: a senior, a person with a disability, a veteran, a member of our volunteer fire department. And then we try to give them the right information on where they need to go for that it has nothing to do with their assessment.
Right.
To be effective, folks need to come in and merely state that their valuation is not correct. They should say what it should be, and then make the case for here's why. They should bring their drawings, they should bring measurements, they should bring photos. Photos are helpful. They should bring comparable values, very, very important. And they should bring other appraisals, professional appraisals that they may have gotten. All of that is stirred into the mix, and then the board deliberates and either grants the value that the appellant asked for, rejects it outright, or comes somewhere in between.
So the board does have the authority then to, let's say if the tax assessor says the value is here and the person applying for relief says it's here, you can pick a number in the middle, right?
Absolutely.
So it's not like arbitration where it's going to be this way or that way.
Right.
Okay.
You know, one thing about the assessment, the town hires a firm to do the assessment. It goes out to bid, and these firms are professional in doing this. And they do a pretty good job. They're pretty accurate. They're right on the money. They do the studies, the real estate demographics. So when they come in, they're pretty much on target.
Pretty buttoned up.
Right. And you know, Bethel, we're fortunate. You know, we've been pretty lucky. I understand last year there was, because of the market dropping so much and the homeowners, their you know, values going down, there was a lot of appeals. I don't know the exact number that were rejected or accepted, but you know, my own personal, I think my property was pretty much right on target. I had no qualms about what I was assessed at. So.
Now, you brought up an interesting point, John. I think the last period that this started was 2007, and then the new valuations were applied beginning in 2008, correct? And interestingly enough, 2007, just prior to that date, was the maximum point of the so-called housing bubble, you know, that was fueled by the subprime mortgage market and created tremendous demand, especially for what you would call entry-level priced homes. So from up to 2007, those homes had increased in value by approximately 70% in that price category. Now, when I go door to door in the campaigning this season, I hear from many people in some of those neighborhoods that they really feel that their value has gone down, and they think that their tax bill will go down when they're reassessed. So they ask questions about the appeal process. But how does that really work? The value has to be. They have to prove that or show evidence that the value was wrong as of the date of the assessment.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Right. Yeah.
So you can't take the 2008 number and say, well, now it's 2009 and the value is different.
Right. Now, some relief, and it maybe seems theoretical rather than real, is assessments used to be mandated. They had to be, reevaluation had to be done every 10 years.
Right.
So I've been in town long enough that we had that same spike in 1980. We caught the market at the high end, and everyone lived with those assessments for 10 years. Now it's been shortened to 5, and in some cases 4 years. So there's a smaller gap. But you can't change one person's assessment and not change everybody else's. It really has to be as of the date of the assessment.
Right. Now, this I have a very complicated question. In theory, the purpose of reassessing property is to have an accurate valuation. It's not to get more money from the taxpayers, because the way it should work is as property values go up, the mill rate goes down, so the revenue stream stays the same. And yet, in some categories of housing, as I mentioned, say with the starter homes, those people have seen actual real tax increases, some of them quite burdensome over the past few years. Because some property escalates in price faster than others, so that shifts the burden. And there really isn't anything in state law that allows us to deal with that, is there?
Well, there is something in state law that can deal with huge overnight increases in the total reevaluation happening. And it allows a town to phase in the assessments. Danbury did that, and I think they're on either the 3rd or 4th year of their assessments. Doesn't change your assessment, but it says over a 3-year period or a 4-year period, that new assessment will be phased in.
Okay.
On the surface, sounds like a good deal. If you look a little closer, it means that instead of getting a tax increase this year, you're going to get a tax increase every year for the next 4 years.
Right.
So it's designed to kind of moderate but not eliminate the effect.
So it's designed to just ease the tax break in or tax increase in, as opposed to having it go from this to that in a 1-year period, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I would imagine that also means that for people whose property might have devalued, who might be getting a little bit of a tax break, they have to see that break come in little increments as well, too, right?
Yeah, reevaluation is designed to equalize all of the property values.
Right.
The sum total of it then is the grand list, and the grand list really grows through new properties rather than inflating property values.
Right.
And as you pointed out, if the assessments go down, the total grand list goes down. and the budget stays the same, no new spending, the mill rate will go up and just the opposite.
Right.
But
So-
on any given case, there certainly could be wide swings and variations.
So if the grand list only changes through development of new properties, then that's why smart planning is critically important in your economic structure.
Oh, absolutely, and then a mix too, condos,
Private homes.
individual dwellings, commercial, any number of things. You really do need that mix.
Yeah.
Of the industrial, commercial growth in town.
Right.
Hopefully that will start putting an offset
Right.
to the homeowners. That's what we want.
Now, I want to get into some of your individual background that you bring to the table in this, but I have one last question, and this, you'll have to tell me. That I just thought of this one. It wasn't in my prepared notes, and it might be something I would have to ask the tax assessor. But I've noticed that when there are new condo developments in town, people will buy these new condos, and they'll move in, and there is a very big change sometimes when they get their first assessment versus what it was when they first moved in. Do you have any knowledge about that, about why that happens? I've seen that happen in other cities too, where it's almost like there's an estimated tax when they first move in, and then they get the real tax about a year or two later.
Well, I think you hit on it with the key word estimated, so
Okay.
that as it's being developed, the assessor working with the property developers comes up with an estimated, excuse me, an estimated assessment. But until it's actually finished and assessed, then it isn't set, so that when someone buys the thing, the developer is making an estimate, and in most cases they're probably making a low estimate, just as it is with the common charges. Common charges, common charges only go one way.
Right. They never go down.
Always go up.
Yeah.
So during the development process, it's up to the developer of the property to do that estimate?
No, but it's the developer or whoever is representing them selling the property to be as realistic as possible in explaining to people what their assessment might be.
Right.
And then the lender is probably insisting on escrow, and they always estimate on the high side. So it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
It's multifaceted.
It's complicated. I remember when listening to folks who had moved into one of the newer developments in town a number of years ago, really got hit when that first happened. But it's also important for them to understand that if they are in that category where their property escalated in value faster than the rest of the town, they're going to be paying more tax because of that, but the town doesn't realize any new revenue from that. As you mentioned, the budget stays the same. So I've had, when I was on the Board of Ed, well, I'm still on the Board of Ed, but during the budget season, I'll have people say, well, what is the town doing with all that new money that I'm giving it? And, of course, the reality is some people pay more, some people pay less in the reassessment process, but the town revenue stream doesn't change at all.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. One little thing that people quite often overlook: their assessment goes up, the mill rate goes down.
Right.
So they still may be paying more income or more property tax on their dwelling, but the same mill rate then is used for their motor vehicle, and that will have gone down because it's a lower mill rate. And so when they get the total of the number of envelopes that they're going to get from the tax assessor, their total bill may still in fact go down.
Right, because cars don't appreciate in value; they only go down.
Right.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about why you're running and what you bring to the table. Now, John, you've been you're a volunteer fireman.
Right.
You have worked with the town agencies for a great number of years. Tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I've been in town for 54 years. Grew up in Bethel.
You're a newcomer.
I'm a newcomer, right. Went to Bethel High School. My daughter and my son, both graduates of Bethel High School. My daughter just got married last week. And I've been in the fire department for 36 years. And I served on the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I like the town of Bethel. I like the people. It's a great town. It's a great town to raise a family, to live in. And, I just want to give back something to the town. Being 36 years in the fire department, I'm starting to ease out of that and let the younger guys take care of that.
The guys who run faster?
Yeah, a lot faster. And you know, I wanted to run for office this year, and I thought this would be a good board to get into.
Good. Now, Tom, I know, I think you've served on everything except for selectmen, including this board already, but we got a couple minutes left, so tell us a little bit more about you, something we don't already know.
Well, let me tell you why I ran and was elected to the Board of Assessment in the first time, several years ago. I appealed our assessment a number of years ago, and in the process proved that the house was measured incorrectly. And so our assessment was modified. And we were treated so rudely and so cavalierly by the then folks that were on that Board of Assessment Appeals. I said, I can do better than this. And so I ran for the Board of Assessment Appeals and really learned an awful lot about the process. Yes, I have been on the Board of Finance and the Town Treasurer and a number of other things. But I do bring 44 years of owning a home in Bethel, and so I think I can relate to the people that are on the other side of the appeals. And if the voters wish, I'm more than happy to do it again for 2 years.
And to the point that you just made, the fact that somebody feels that their assessment needs to be reviewed again is no reason to be treated rudely. You know, and as you said, you can be an advocate for that property owner. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. Once again, John Menti and Thomas O'Leary running for the Board of Assessment Appeals. Few weeks, and then we'll know the answer. But hopefully, the voters will be kind to all of us. And
we hope.
And I'm speaking for all of us, and I say we are all anxious to serve the people of Bethel. So good luck to both of you.
And likewise to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt.
And to our viewers, you've been watching Bethel Today. My name is Matt Knickerbocker. Check us out at www.betheltoday.com for more information, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Have a great night.